John was having a hard time finding the horse of his dream, but when he first laid eyes on this enormous creature, he immediately knew this was the animal he wanted. He made a deal with the owner, which was surprisingly easy and cheap, but he didn't know that there was something special about this horse. Something so special, even the police would get involved. John knew that he had no other choice but to bring his new horse to the vet. There was something going on with his beloved animal and he could not fix it himself, but it quickly became clear that the vet was no focused on getting the animal back to full health. He was actually worried about something very different and quickly informed the police. Now, the police soon called John to ask him some questions about Bailey's previous owner, Peter. John told them everything he knew, but they still wouldn't tell him what was going on. John decided to take matters into his own hands. He knew he had to do something if he ever wanted to see Bailey again. When John returned to the farm where he had bought Bailey, he couldn't believe his eyes. The barn was completely abandoned. What was going on? Why did the police take Bailey away? Was he ever going to see him again? And what did Peter have to do with everything? But before we start, smash the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. John was determined to buy the perfect horse. He walked around town, passing many horse farms, barns, and equestrian centers, trying to find a perfect match. He was very excited that he could finally start his search and hoped that he would return home that day with a new best friend by his side. But however, he lost hope quickly. All the horses he came across were beautiful, but very expensive. They all cost at least double the amount of money that he had saved. He hadn't expected them to cost that much money. John was disappointed and headed back home alone after a failed mission, or so he thought. On his way back, he chose to take a scenic route. This route was a longer walk to his house, but he took it often as it passed by beautiful flower fields and he enjoyed the scenery. He thought maybe it might cheer him up a little. And it definitely did, more than he expected. Halfway the road lay an abandoned farm. He had walked by it many times and he always thought it was a pity that it was unoccupied. It looked beautiful, and the location was perfect as well. However, this time he noticed something weird about it. Something was different. John noticed that the light inside the farmhouse was on and the windows were open. He also saw a mini truck parked on the premises and the light in the stables behind the house was turned on as well. John couldn't help but wonder, had someone bought this farm? As he stood before the gate, a man walked out of the house and came to greet him. He introduced himself as Peter and told him that he had recently bought the farm. And John couldn't hide his excitement when he heard what Peter had to tell him next. Peter was going to start his own horse farm. He had already brought in some horses that he wanted to sell to make a name for himself, and after that, he planned to expand his business. John had come across him just at the perfect time, because Peter had some good news for him. Because he wasn't from the area and nobody had heard of him before, he wanted to build a reputation before expanding his business. Peter was selling the first couple of horses at a discount. Maybe John had saved just enough money to buy his first horse after all. They walked to the stable and Peter showed John some of the horses he had. They were all beautiful and in his precious manes and coats. Peter explained that they were all well-mannered and well-trained, which made them perfect for beginners as well. That was exactly what John needed. He'd had some horse riding lessons as a child, but that had been a long time ago. Even though all the horses were beautiful, there was one horse that stood out to John. He had a beautiful black mane, and when John came to pet him, he immediately rested his head on his shoulder. John's heart melted, and he felt that this horse could be his new companion. When he asked how much the horse cars cost, Peter replied that he could make an offer, as he was the first buyer at his new farm. John offered exactly the amount of money that he had saved, and to his surprise, Peter accepted. John was so happy that he finally had his own horse. While walking home, he decided to name him Bailey. Over the next few days, John and Bailey spent a lot of time together. They took walks, played together, and truly became best friends. John had also taken Bailey to the vet for a checkup, and Dr. Roberts confirmed that he was a strong and healthy horse. However, after a while, John started to notice something weird about the animal. Bailey was growing. Not in a normal way, Bailey was becoming huge. Over time, he had grown so big that John could not even mount him anymore. John didn't know what to think of it. Was this normal? Had he missed something? He hadn't seen such a big horse before in his life. What was he supposed to do now? John decided to call Dr. Roberts and ask for advice. When he explained what was going on, the doctor told him to come by the veterinary clinic as soon as possible. John started to worry about his beautiful Bailey. What was happening to him? Was he going to be okay? Once they arrived at the clinic, Dr. Roberts examined Bailey once again. He was nodding and mumbling something to himself. Yes, I see. It seems to be a match. John didn't understand what he was talking about, but he didn't have any time to ask either. The doctor told him, "Wait here, I'll be right back," and stormed out of the room. John was left alone with Bailey, becoming increasingly more nervous and worried. Bailey sensed his nervousness and neighed. "Don't worry, we're going to be okay," John told Bailey, but maybe was also telling it to himself. Dr. Roberts soon returned and told John that he had some bad news. John's heart skipped a beat. What was going on? Was something wrong with Bailey? He thought it might have something to do with Bailey's health, but he never expected to hear what the doctor told him next. "I cannot share any details with you at the moment, but I have called the police. You are free to go, but Bailey has to stay here." John's mouth fell open. What? The police? What did they have to do with this? He couldn't just let them take Bailey away from him, but Dr. Roberts insisted, and there was nothing John could say or do to change his mind. The doctor assured him that there was nothing wrong with Bailey's health, but that there was something else going on. Something very big and serious. This would be a good time to say his goodbyes. John wasn't sure whether he would ever see his beautiful Bailey again. They hadn't spent a long part of their lives together, but they had thoroughly enjoyed each other's company. John was heartbroken, and Bailey also couldn't conceal his sadness. Were they ever going to meet again? The next day, John received a call from the police. They had some questions about Bailey and needed to know exactly where he had bought him and how much money he had paid for him. John told them everything and tried to get some information out of them in return, but they wouldn't tell him anything. But then he had an idea. John decided he should go talk to Peter. He was determined to get some answers and would do anything to find out what was going on with Bailey. He almost ran to the farm, but when he got there, he saw something shocking. He could not believe his eyes. The barn was abandoned again. As it turns out, Peter was part of a criminal organization that had been stealing the biggest horses they could find all over the country. They used them for selective breeding and sold them to unwary customers. There had been many reports about huge horses like Bailey, and Dr. Roberts had recognized the signs. Peter and his team were caught by the police, and Bailey was returned to John so they could live happily ever after.